I watched a young soldier take his seat on the plane, and the guy by the window said, "Son."
Today is May 20th, 2013. We are at the Riverview Public Library, and my name is Kirk Borger. I'm the director here at the library, and we are interviewing Riverview resident Gerald Masely, who lives on 14389 Dundee. And thank you for coming in today. I appreciate it. We'll just start off with some background questions. Where and when were you born?
I was born in 1945 in a house in River Rouge.
Not a hospital?
Not a hospital. Born in a home.
What were your parents' occupations, and how many siblings did you have?
At the time of birth, my dad was a merchant marine in World War II in the Atlantic and the Pacific. My mom was a stay-at-home mom.
So during World War, well, I see you were born in 45. Okay. So before, well, but your dad, well, all through World War II, your dad wasn't home. Are your stepbrothers younger or older than you?
My stepbrothers are all younger than me.
What high school did you attend?
I went to Schaefer High School in Southgate. Graduated in 1963.
What were you doing before you entered the military?
Before I entered the military, I was a college dropout, and I got a job working at Ford Motor Company. And after I dropped out of college after 1 year.
What school were you going to?
Central.
Michigan.
And I was working at Ford Motor Company when the military or the government saw that I should be working somewhere else.
What were you doing at Ford?
I was actually an hourly person in working in the steel mill.
Were any of your family members in the military before, during, or after your service?
When my dad remarried, I lived with my cousins, two of them. One was in Vietnam before I went to Vietnam. I came back, I went to Vietnam, come back. I had another cousin go while I was in Vietnam, but unfortunately he never made it back.
So you did mention you were drafted.
Yes, sir.
Could you tell us about that experience? I know you were given a number.
Yes, I was.
And then tell us what happened.
I was given a number, and actually my fiance, my wife, my present wife, we had plans to get married in November, and I was supposed
what year?
November of 1965.
Okay.
And my draft notice was to be ready, available in September of '65. So at that time, we contacted Representative Dingle and wrote him a letter, and that we had plans, had money set down, and everything. And he spoke up on my behalf, and got extended till December of '65, so that we could go ahead with our plans to go ahead and get married, which we did. And that was November 27th of '65. Then 2 weeks later, she dropped me off at Fort Wayne to get on the bus.
And from the bus, where did you go?
From the bus, we went to Fort Knox, Kentucky.
And that's where your basic training was, correct?
Basic training was at Fort Knox.
Okay. What was a typical day like in your basic training?
Typical day was very busy. You get up at 5 o'clock in the morning. You stand up for inspection, do a little running. Then you go to the mess hall where you got 4 minutes to eat. And then start your calisthenics and your running and whatever other training was scheduled for that day, whether it be marksmanship or building tents, digging foxholes, whatever the day they had on the agenda. You didn't get to play in your day.
Would you say the physical training was probably the most difficult part?
Physical training was the most difficult part. Fortunately, mentally, I resolved myself to the fact that I was drafted. I didn't want to go to jail. I didn't want to go to Canada. So the physical part was getting in shape to what they wanted me to be and what I wanted to be. I had played a lot of sports. I thought I was in good shape, but evidently
Found out differently?
Found out differently, yes. So it was difficult, but it was fun.
Right.
And you got to meet a lot of good people, and it was competitive.
Yeah, that's what a lot of the other veterans have said about
Yeah.
basically. If anything, they got to meet different people from all sorts of from all different parts of the country.
Oh yeah. And it was good. I mean, there was most of them all were from Detroit. There were other small cities from around different areas like Kentucky and that, where they mixed you up in basic. But and it's funny because there was a couple of guys that thought they were in better shape than
they really were,
and they weren't going to take orders. And I remember one incident that like opened my eyes up is this one gentleman thought he was really smart to the DI. And we had to march from one end of Fort Knox to the other to where the basic barracks were. And we were told to be shaved and ready at 5:30 in the morning to go. We were going to march. And he saw that he didn't want to shave. So the DI took his equipment from him, carried it, and handed him a razor blade and said, "Shave while we're marching." What a pitiful mess that was when we got there.
I don't think it was successful in shaving, was it?
So, no, it wasn't. Not at all. Not at all.
After basic training, did you have any specialized training?
After basic, I went to Fort Eustus, Virginia for helicopter training, actually to be qualified as a crew chief. Crew chief entails knowing everything about that helicopter from the rotor blades down to the skids, on how to load it with people, how to load it with equipment, because it was UH-1B and it's very versatile, and you had to know all that, and it was 4 months of training at Fort Eustis, Virginia, which was very good too. It was all good people. People that wanted that special training, and it was actually better than being in infantry,
right?
Because your conditions, your habitat areas were a lot better. You only occasionally did have to go into a combat zone.
Right. What was your? Had you ever worked on helicopters before? Or
Never
no?
have. Never.
Yeah.
And never even had an inclination to be a mechanic.
Mm-hmm.
But we had, I think, 2 weeks off or 3 weeks after basic, and then report to Fort Eustis, Virginia. And I was able to take my wife with me.
Oh. Okay.
How
long was the specialized training?
That was for 4 months.
4 months.
4 months of basic training.
And what were you learning?
You learn how to maintain the helicopter, the weight distribution. You learn everything inside and out about that helicopter.
Which helicopter was it? What?
The UH-1Bs.
Okay.
The Hueys.
Right.
And you learn the weight distribution. You learn how to man the M60 machine guns, and just basically take care of it. Because there was, they were having a problem in Vietnam with the crew chiefs or the maintenance men. They called it, the service called them crew chiefs. They were having too many helicopters that were breaking down or crashing. There was, maybe I shouldn't tell this, but I'm going to tell it anyhow because it's in the past. But there was between military, the enlisted men and the officers, there was a feud going on. They felt that the planes, helicopters were sabotage. So the rule was in '65 or '66 when I was training, you fix the helicopter, you go up with it.
Mm-hmm. What did you think about the helicopter itself? Did you think it was a good machine?
Oh, absolutely.
I mean,
it was a great machine. We had learned a lot and had a lot of fun with it.
Because, I mean, that's the symbol of the Vietnam War.
Yeah.
It's that helicopter.
It was the UH-1Bs,
right.
the Hueys and that. No, like I said, I dived into it because it was a new adventure. It was a scary adventure, but once you flew, you took off, and it was a lot of fun. I mean, we used to go along the beaches in Virginia Beach, scare the heck out of people and go down low. I mean, you could do a lot with that helicopter, but no, I wasn't scared of it. I wasn't scared of it. I enjoyed it. You have to, because if you don't, you're not going to learn nothing.
Right. So after Fort Eustis, you went to Fort Bragg. What did you do at Fort Bragg?
At Fort Bragg, our first, we got assigned to 608 Transportation. That was our outfit. And we were supposed to get our equipment ready for shipment deployed in September of '66 to Vietnam. And being young and not knowledgeable enough, we didn't have our equipment ready, because you have to go through a rigorous inspection, especially going overseas. And our equipment wasn't up to the standards that it should have been. And we had to take more time to train more and get our equipment ready. Finally, we got it ready in February of '67. In that time, prior to that and during that time, we did ship a lot of our equipment, because we had to take it all over there with us to Vietnam. We shipped it down to, convoyed it down to South Carolina, where they loaded it on a cargo ship there and shipped some of it there. The rest of it, we went out to Fort Lewis, Washington, loaded up a troop carrier there, along with the 82nd Airborne out of Fort Bragg as well, and we all headed for Vietnam out of Fort Lewis, Washington.
So you went from Fort Lewis, you took a ship to where?
Saigon.
Saigon. How long did that take?
30 days on the boat.
What did you do in a month on a boat?
I was fortunate. I was a crypto guard. Crypto guard is you guard over all the vital statistics and information and everything like that. So I had a job to do. There was 4 of us, and you just sit at this crypto guard and almost near the bottom of the ship and guard material, so that no one, because they didn't trust even the people on the ship,
right,
the soldiers. So that I did that till we got to Saigon. But we did stop in Guam.
Oh, okay.
They let us stop in Guam. That's the first time a troop carrier had ever stopped there since World War II.
Wow.
And the people greeted us. They had a big spread for us, and we were treated like kings.
How were you treated when you went to Saigon?
Well,
well, tell us the story.
Well, I mean, I was able to be on deck when we pulled into Saigon Harbor, and it wasn't a pretty sight. It's, I don't want to say what we saw when we first came up in the bay there. It's it was a combat zone.
Right.
Let me put it that way.
Right.
It was a combat zone, and there was a lot of debris before we docked the boat.
So a big difference between Guam and
Oh yeah,
and
big
Vietnam.
difference. Yeah, there was no steak dinner for us in Saigon.
Yeah.
So,
so you were in Vietnam. Let's see. So you went to Vietnam in May 1967. Correct. And you were there from December to December 1967.
That's right.
Well, speaking of Saigon and then speaking of Vietnam in general, could you describe some of the feelings that you had and about the country and the people that you encountered there?
The country was very beautiful. Beautiful country. The people are like people anywhere. Some people hate you. Some people like you.
And some people don't care.
Some people really don't care. I mean, but it was pretty. The certain places that you went, certain places, as everybody heard, was very ugly because of the Agent Orange spray. But overall, it's very similar to what's going on right now in today's times with the Afghan people, the Iraqi people, the Iranians. You can't trust them. We didn't trust them then. We had village people to help them make a living. They came in and they did the cooking, they did dishes, they did the laundry for us. But there were times where we had explosions in the compounds and attacks at night because they knew the lay of the land. They knew, excuse me, they knew how to get in and out, and they knew where to go and assault and attack. So, you know, but it wasn't everybody.
Since you were deployed in a combat zone, is there one thing that sticks out? Is there one story that sticks out about your experience?
There's a lot of stories, but the one that was my scaredest moment, because I had time to think about it. When I was flying, you don't have time to think, especially when you get fired upon. You just react and try to do the best you can. But one of the scariest moments was the fact that I had volunteered. I didn't take R&R because I didn't want to put the wife through that. And R&Rs were in either Tokyo or Hawaii. Would have been nice for the wife, but I opted not to. And I have volunteered for this assignment to deliver. Not only did we transport with helicopter, we also transported with trucks. And I had volunteered to go to the Ankh Pass, which was very hilly, and the word Ankh Pass would mean that the trails are up high and there's a big valley. And I didn't know exactly what the assignment was. They didn't tell us till the morning we were leaving, and we had lined up in a convoy. And the last words that the major had told us that if someone in front of you gets shot, gets mortared, you just keep right on going. If you got to push them over the side of the mountain, you go. So that to me, I had time to think about that, especially prior and while you're driving. And there was a lot of fire that day.
How did you stay in contact with your friends and family? Did you get a sense of how your family felt about your service through your communication with them?
You have free mail.
Okay.
I don't know, I'm assuming that's for the guys that are overseas now. I'm assuming they have that, but it was free mail. You had an APO address in San Francisco that all our mail went to, which was red, but you know, that's how I kept in contact with her. Did I tell her what my assignments were, what my duties were from day to day, week to week? No, all I did was let her know what location I was in, because she had a map of Vietnam. Her dad helped her make that, and she followed the locations, used pin placements to let her know where I was at, because she'd watch the news every night, you know, to see what location where there was problems or what locations they're reporting from. And but I didn't see it fit to let her know what I was doing. You know,
Well, you didn't want her to worry.
right. I mean, you know, because we went on search and rescue missions. We deployed troops to hot landing zones. As a transportation outfit, we also delivered equipment, and some of it was all by air. We delivered on ground too, and there was some pretty hectic stories about that as well.
How much did you tell your family and friends of your actual combat experience at the time? Did you keep things from them? You probably didn't tell them everything.
Not a lot. I really don't talk about it too much.
Do they ask a lot?
Actually, no. They you know, they know that's kind of personal. I just recently with the grandkids, they're doing on Veterans Day. They have all the grandkids have done a project, and I have forwarded photographs and did some writing for my grandkids in Texas.
How many grandchildren do you have?
5.
5?
5.
How many children do you have?
2 boys.
2?
2 boys and
then 5 grandchildren.
2 granddaughters, one at the beginning, she's 20 and going to school in Columbus, Ohio. And the youngest one, she's going to be 8 in July. So 3 boys in between.
Did you know you were going to be sent home from Vietnam in December 1967? Well, not home, but you knew you were going to leave Vietnam in December 1967.
We had our orders.
Where did you go from there?
We left Vietnam. We flew right back to Fort Lewis, Washington, where we had left from by troop carrier, and ETS'd out of there. It took almost 2 days to debrief and get everything squared away and get a uniform, because you didn't have a dress uniform, so you didn't no need for dress uniforms in Vietnam. So we got issued our dress uniforms and our papers and our money, and booked our flights and came home.
Did you stop anywhere between?
Stopped in Chicago for a couple hours while we were making a connecting flight. And it actually wasn't a real warm welcome like it was in Guam. In fact, Guam was very nice compared to what Chicago was, because my friend and I that were in together, after we debarked the plane, we wanted to go get something to drink, something to eat, because we were hungry. It was a long flight, and people were very rude and obnoxious to us, and criticized us for being military, and of course we had had your Vietnam patch, and how they knew that, maybe they've seen enough of it, but they could tell we were in Vietnam, and they had a lot of heckling, almost a lot of trouble, but
And you were discharged right there.
Well, you weren't discharged. You were just relieved of duty at that time.
You were just relieved of duty. When were you discharged then?
Actually, I think it was 1971 was the honorable discharge. But back then, if you served in Vietnam, you didn't have to do, most of the guys that in the service have to do summer training in the reserves. Due to the fact that you went to Vietnam, you were exonerated from going.
You were exempt from that, right?
From that, correct.
Okay. What was the reaction from people people in your family, to friends, to acquaintances? Were they happy that you were home?
Oh yeah, everybody was ecstatic. Everybody was happy.
Now, you'd only seen had you seen your son at all? You'd seen him?
No,
you hadn't.
He was born in February, and I left in May. Actually, before that, because I brought him home before we left for Vietnam, him and the wife. But he was only 2 months old when I left him, and when I got home, he was 10 months old. And when he got up that morning, the night I came in, because I got in at 3 o'clock in the morning, he was like very strange. What am I doing there? Who's this strange guy that's here? Because he always only had mom and grandpa.
Right.
And my brother would go over there occasionally, but he was little then. But yeah, it was difficult for him to accept me, and but as time went on, we resolved that issue. He realized I was dad, so well, a little bit of spoiling.
Right. Now, that was kind of a family transition process that you had to go through. Now, could you tell me a little about the other process that you had to go through in civilian life? Now, what was your job situation like when you got home?
I was able to, with Ford Motor Company, able to maintain my job based on contractual agreements and being drafted and so on and so forth. But I didn't want to go back to Ford's. I stalled it off, and applied for state police, applied for a sheriff's department, got accepted at both, wanted to do that. But one thing the Army taught me was to be a responsible person. We had, while I was gone, my wife's dad had purchased a home for us. And so when I got home, I had a home, I had a wife and a baby to take care of. To go into law enforcement, I had to go to school. Takes money to raise a house, takes money to raise a wife and a child, and so I fought this for a while, and finally resolved myself to go back to Ford's. That I had to be a responsible person. That's what I had to do. No matter what the other callings were, I still had to do this, and I almost didn't make it because there was a time limit. And fortunately, my dad was able to pull some strings for me and get me back in there under the wire into Ford Motor Company, and stayed there for 37 years.
Do you stay in contact with people that you knew from your military experience?
Not since I retired. I was in contact with a couple of them, one from Flat Rock and one from Detroit, but the closest that that we got. It kind of faded out because when I retired and the other folks retired, everybody kind of went their separate ways with their grandkids and their families. Nowadays, the market says the kids go where the jobs are. I have a son and his two kids and wife live in Texas, in Houston, and another son and his three children and wife live up in Alma, Michigan.
Do you belong to any veterans organizations?
No, I did the BFW in Trenton, but I just, like I said, with all the traveling that we do, I couldn't give it justice to be a member and not be there, only but for a few months, because as my grandkids have grown and they've been active in sports, I've traveled to go watch them play sports.
Right.
So, and to go down to Texas. We go to Texas for a couple months. So.
Mm-hmm. Where in Texas?
Just north of Houston, called the Woodlands.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I know where that is. So, okay. The two final questions. How do you think your military service impacted your life?
I think it's a good thing that I did. I liked it. I enjoyed it. I met a lot of good people, and I learned a lot. I learned to be responsible. I learned to be on time. I learned how to plan. And just, I wish a lot of kids, not all of them, but there are certain kids that aren't going to go to college. There are certain kids that aren't going to pick be a specialist, a helicopter mechanic, an airplane mechanic, or whatever. And I think, and I have friends that have sons that way, that had to go into service, and it made them a better person. It made them a better person. You can't be scared to go into service. It's if you're scared, that's a bad thing, because you'll get into a lot of trouble then. But you go, make the best of it, and hope the best comes out to the end. That you will be in this position maybe one day to talk about it.
Right. Now, if there's one thing you wanted to tell people about your military experience, what you learned, what would it be?
The thing I would say is that had it not been for Vietnam, and I'll be honest, I really didn't want to go back again. I would have stayed. If they told me I had to stay, I would stay. But it was a great experience. I feel good as American citizen to be able to do my contribution for the protection and the welfare of this country and the freedom.
Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you, Mr. Masely. I appreciate it very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
This is the moment, this is the day when I send all my doubts and demons on their way. Every endeavor I have made ever